trumpet in Zion, Zion. Sound the alarm on my holy mountain. Blow the trumpet in Zion, Zion. Sound the alarm. They rush on the city, they run on the wall. Great is the army that carries out his word. They rush on the city, they run on the wall. Great is the
Good evening and welcome to the Apostasy Warning Program. I'm your host, Brian DeLorean. I thank you all for tuning into the program this evening. And on tonight's program, I'm going to be presenting a message entitled, The Importance of Verifying Miracles. And the inspiration for this message actually comes from the backlash I've experienced after presenting a message over a year ago on the truth about Smith Wigglesworth. And so many people took issue with the fact that I dared doubt a man with Wigglesworth's credentials. They sent me many messages on my YouTube channel. They told me that they weren't happy about that. Some commended me for taking the stand that I took because I believe that Smith Wigglesworth was a charlatan. The reason I believe that is because, first of all, he made many claims of raising the dead, none of which have been independently verified by anybody, anywhere. Do the research. It's not there. And this is what I would say to these, I'm trying to be nice, these people who have given me feedback on my program to let me know how they felt about what I said. They never said anything of substance to refute what I was saying in that message, because they don't have anything of substance to say, because they don't know anything, because they're basing what they believe on their own personal bias, on their own emotions, because all you have to do is do the homework, do the research, and you'll see that there is nothing on the internet that can be found that I am aware of, and I've been searching, that about anyone that Wigglesworth raised from the dead, a name, a picture of the person with Wigglesworth. Cameras were around at that time. I don't know why at least a couple of these people wouldn't have had their picture taken with the man who raised them from the dead. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There should be documents from doctors, all sorts of documentation. I mean, and this is what I'm going to get into tonight, because this is what happened with Jesus. And just imagine, Jesus ascended back into heaven. He did so in front of 500 witnesses. Paul talks about that in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. When Jesus was hung on the cross, there were numerous witnesses to the things that occurred at that time. When the darkness was upon the face of the earth for 3 hours, and there was an earthquake, and all sorts of things that took place, and they were witnessed by so many people, and in many cases, those people who at the time of the crucifixion were Jesus' biggest detractors became his biggest supporters, and converted to the Christian faith. So the gathering of evidence by of eyewitnesses is very important, because God saw fit to make sure that none of what happened during Jesus' life was hidden from anyone. And yet, we have a man, Smith Wigglesworth, who claimed to have raised 27 people from the dead, and there's not one scintilla of evidence that any of this ever occurred. Oh yes, you have many people who talk about it. Anybody can talk. Talk is cheap. Anyone can talk about something. But where is the evidence? Where are the eyewitnesses? According to at least one account by somebody, I don't know who it was, Wigglesworth raised a man from the dead in a funeral home. Now, I don't know how many people were there at the time, but I'm sure it was a lot of people. And if this miracle actually occurred in front of these people, I would think they would have been talking about it. I think that would have been big news. I think it would have spread throughout all that area. And yet, there's nothing. Not one word to independently verify the claims of Smith Wigglesworth about raising all these people from the dead. 27 people? That's remarkable. Okay? And not one eyewitness, not one name of a person who was raised from the dead, not one documentation from a doctor stating that, Mr. Smith was sick and he passed away, and now I heard I was there, I went to the funeral and he was raised from the dead. None of this. Nothing that you can say would be considered evidence in a situation like this. And yet the book of Luke, I believe it's chapter 1, verse 2, Luke tells us that he gathered the information from Jesus' life from eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses are important. I mean, and why is it that people who take great care to govern their lives, and they make sure they jot every they cross every T and every jot and tittle, and they make sure that everything is done correctly, and they're skeptical of everyone. They don't just take anyone's word for anything, which no one should ever do. When it comes to things like this, spiritual things, they're all of a sudden, the people who would do something like this in their own personal lives, when it comes to spiritual things, they say, oh, well, I believe Smith Wigglesworth did that. Well, why? Why do you believe that? And that was the whole point to that message. Why? Why would you believe that? Why should I believe that? On what evidence should I base my belief that Smith Wigglesworth raised 27 people from the dead? There isn't any evidence to that fact. There isn't any evidence to that rumor. It's not a proven fact. It has not yet ever been established by anyone that I know of that this actually happened. And if it actually happened, I would think there would be names, there would be pictures of the person who had been raised from the dead, smiling and standing with their arms around Smith Wigglesworth. I would think there would be newspaper articles. I would think there would be all sorts of documentation from the funeral home. After all, someone pays you to handle the burial of a loved one, and all of a sudden the loved one's raised from the dead. Well, I mean, that's going to get some attention. Well, what do we do now? They paid for the funeral, and now the funeral's off. The guy's been raised from the dead. How do we handle that? I mean, I would think there would be something. And it's just crickets. It doesn't exist. And yet, these people are wasting their time and their energy attacking me because I dared to stand up and say, I don't believe this is true. I believe this guy is a false teacher. I believe he's making false claims. And I have evidence also that he is a false prophet. And yet, in the book of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21, Paul tells us to test all things and to hold fast to that which is good. Well, this is all part of the testing. When I did the research before I did that message, I made sure that I had all my ducks in a row before I took that message to the air. Because if there was something that I overlooked, someone could, come back on me and accuse me of all kinds of things. But it did never happen because there's nothing there. So instead of wasting your time and energy attacking me for standing up for the truth, why don't you go to work and do some research? And when you come up with some research that refutes what I said in that message about the character of Smith Wigglesworth, then we might have something to talk about. But nobody does that. All they do is flap their gums and call me names and make all kinds of insinuations that I'm attacking a servant of God, and God might strike me dead. I mean, these are the insinuations I'm getting. But there's been a few people that said, "Hey, you make some fair points there," but most of the feedback I've gotten from people who have listened to that program, which is in the thousands, by the way. Actually, it's I think it's like 1,200 somewhere. So it is in the thousands. Yes, it's in the thousands. Thousands of people have listened to that message, and I probably got feedback from just maybe 30 or 40. It's not that many, but I usually don't get much feedback at all about my messages. Once in a while I do, but in this particular case, a lot of people took issue with what I was saying about Wigglesworth, and of course they had the right to do that, but if you're going to judge righteously, then you have to look at the facts. And the facts are that there is no information rather, to indicate that any of these incidents where Smith Wigglesworth claimed to raise them from the dead, people from the dead, actually ever occurred. It's just not there. And so because of that, and because of a few other things that I'm going to get into in just a minute, I have stood up and said, listen, I believe this is a bunch of nonsense. I believe this is the work of fiction. There is no raising anyone from the dead. He never raised a soul from the dead, or probably didn't even perform any of the other miracles he claimed to have performed. But Wigglesworth also did some other things that proved to me that he was a charlatan. First of all, Wigglesworth believed in a great end-time revival. I used to believe that too, because once again, this is the work of the Word of Faith movement, and they believe that there will be an end-time revival in which millions of people will be swept into the kingdom of God, and then eventually, after that, Jesus will return and take the church up in the rapture, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Well, I believe in the rapture, but I certainly don't believe that there is an end-time revival. In fact, the Bible talks, it says the exact opposite will happen. 1 Timothy 4:1, the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. That's what it says. So, in other words, apostasy will be the norm in the end times, not revival and salvation of souls. The revival of which they speak has already begun on the day of Pentecost, and it continues to this day, and it will continue throughout the entire dispensation of the church age. But when Jesus returns and takes the church up to heaven with him, well, then the church age is over, and then that's it. Anyhow, Mr. Wigglesworth told Lester Summerall, who was a good friend of his, that they were getting ready to part ways. So Mr. Summerall had gone to London for the specific purpose of meeting with Smith Wigglesworth, and they developed a close friendship, and they were friends for just a couple years, I guess. And for whatever reason, Lester was forced back to the United States. And so he went to see Wigglesworth one more time and told him what had happened and that he had to leave. And Mr. Wigglesworth proceeded to prophesy to Lester Summerall that there would be a great end-time revival and that Lester Summerall, would live to see it. Okay, Lester Summerall, this was in like 1946. So 50 years later, on April 28th of 1996, Lester Summerall passed away. And there was that revival had not yet occurred. There was no revival at that time, so that makes Mr. Wigglesworth a false prophet. See, I'm not obligated. I'm not sitting here, trying to bolster the image of my favorite minister. I mean, remember, these men were once. I once held these men in high regard, and I know they were held in high regard by many others besides myself. But after God delivered me from the deception of the Word of Faith movement, I began to see these people in a different light. I began to investigate their claims, and when I couldn't find anything that indicated that what they were claiming was true, then I felt compelled to go ahead with the message exposing them for that. And like I said, I've taken a lot of heat for it. I don't care. And I'm going to continue to say it. Smith Wigglesworth, I believe, was a charlatan. And until someone brings me irrefutable proof that this is not the case, I have absolutely no reason not to say that. I have absolutely no reason to back down from that, and I will never do that. And all you people who attacked me because I dared to speak my mind on a particular issue that is a very important issue, you ought to have your heads examined. And like I said, instead of attacking me, go do the research and see what you come up with. I guarantee you're going to come up with the same thing I came up with. Nothing, because it isn't there. Okay? And Lester Summerall had his problems too. He claimed that he was going to live to 1999, and I believe that Jesus was going to come back at that time, and he would live to see it. Well, like I said, he died April 28th, 1996. Jesus didn't come back then. He didn't come back in 1999, and he hasn't come back yet. So there you go. So much for credibility. Because there is no credibility. The Bible tells us in the book of Leviticus, the books of Deuteronomy, that if a man makes a prediction and it comes to pass, well, that's one thing. And then you respect that man. But if a man who claims to be a prophet makes a prediction and it does not come to pass, you shall not fear that prophet because he's spoken presumptuously. That's what I believe is happening in these cases. So, like I said, I thank everyone for their feedback, but for those of you who have attacked me and said that, insinuated that I was going to, experience the wrath of God, no, I'm not going for talking about a minister of the gospel. Listen, if that man is not a true minister of the gospel, he or she needs to be exposed. And I'm going to do just that. And I'm never going to stop because that is the ministry God has given me. So I want you all to think about what you've been saying about me. And just like I said, it's very simple. If you doubt what I'm saying, then go and do the research yourself. You can message me on YouTube. We can make arrangements for you to forward that information to me. And, of course, I'm going to go over it with a fine-tooth comb before I admit to any wrongdoing. But I don't think it's ever going to come to that because I know what I found, and you're not going to find anything other than what I found. That's what I believe. And that's it. That's what I want to tell you. There's a lot of importance in verifying miracles. When it came to Jesus' life, everything was verified. When his death, it was verified. When he ascended back to heaven, it was verified by eyewitnesses. Okay? The same holds true even today. If something occurs, the funny thing to me is this. We have all these cameras on these cell phones these days. Everybody's basically a photojournalist. Okay? I have my own private Facebook page. I don't spend a lot of time there, but I go through some of the videos. I've seen videos of all kinds, except for one. I've never seen a miracle on video. Never. I've never seen a video where a person's arm grew back out, their legs grew back out, they were raised from the dead. None of that's ever occurred. So that tells me that this type of thing, even though I believe that it can happen, I'm not a cessationist. I believe the gifts of the Spirit will be an operation to the end of this dispensation. I'm not a cessationist. I'm not saying that miracles can occur, but they are not occurring in the numbers or with the frequency that they used to. And there's a reason for that. And I'll get into that at another time. But suffice it to say this. If there were these types of miracles occurring, I would think that somebody somewhere would have it documented and would have it on Facebook, YouTube, and any other social media platform they could. But they don't. And the reason is because these types of miracles are not happening at this time. It's not impossible for them to happen, but they are not happening at this time, and I don't look for them to happen. As we get closer to the end of the church age, the church is going to get worse and worse, and to the point where everyone starts believing their own thing and doing their own thing, and they're eventually going to depart from the faith. So take into consideration what you've heard me say on this message tonight, and I thank you all for your listenership. By the way, I thank all of you who have subscribed to my YouTube page or my YouTube channel. And I would appreciate it if you're a new listener and you like what you've heard here today, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And of course, then there's the website for the program, which is apostasywarning.org. And I also currently have a website called allaboutdemons.com. I wrote this, I posted or put up this website for the specific purpose of refuting all the false teachings about spiritual warfare and how to deal with demons that are currently floating around on the internet. So both of these websites will bless you. Once again, it's apostasywarning.org and allaboutdemons.com. And with that, I'm going to close out the program. I thank you all for listening. And as always, I leave you this reminder to keep the faith and to defend the truth. Have a good night, everybody.
Blow the trumpet in Zion, Zion. Sound the alarm on my holy mountain. Blow the trumpet in Zion, Zion. Sound the alarm. They rush on the city, they run on the wall. Great is the army that carries out